Did you hear that? Exactly. That's the sound of everything falling into place in silence. Before you scroll past, hear me out. In a world drunk on noise, addicted to attention, we've forgotten the taste of stillness, forgotten the sharpness of our own tongue, forgotten that sometimes the strongest voice is the one that says nothing at all. Let me take you somewhere, not a place on the map, but a realm within, a realm where silence isn't emptiness, but clarity, where words aren't ammunition, but intention. The Buddha once said, "The tongue is the sharpest knife in the world." Think about that, not a blade forged in fire, but the one inside your mouth, small, quick, deadly. How many wars have begun from words? How many friendships collapsed because someone had to speak their mind at the wrong time? I used to believe that if I didn't speak, I'd disappear, that silence meant weakness, that I'd lose my chance to be heard, respected, remembered. But I was wrong, so wrong, because true power, the kind that doesn't shout, doesn't perform, doesn't beg, it whispers. And sometimes, it says nothing at all. You see, silence isn't passive, it's deliberate, it's the pause before the truth, it's the breath before the storm, it's restrained when the ego wants to lash out, and wisdom when the world demands a reaction. Silence is where understanding grows, where pain is processed, where peace is made. We often underestimate how damaging words can be. We think if it doesn't bruise skin or draw blood, it doesn't hurt, but words leave invisible wounds, deep ones, deeper than fists ever could. And yet, when used with grace, words can heal, they can lift men, ignite hope. That's the paradox. The very thing that can kill can also resurrect. It all depends on the silence in between. That's the journey I want to take you on. A journey into the art of saying less and meaning more, into the heart of silence, not as absence, but as power, as presence, a quiet rebellion against the noise that numbs us. Because in the end, silence isn't retreat, it's mastery, and those who learn to wield it never speak in vain. The monk led the king deep into the forest, away from the whispers of the palace and the weight of gold and glory. There, under the canopy of ancient trees, he asked the king to sit. No throne, no crown, just the earth beneath and the sky above. The monk gave him only one instruction: sit still, say nothing, do nothing, just be. At first, the king laughed, nervously. This was the grand solution to his torment. He, a man who commanded armies and governed lands, was being told to sit in silence like a child being punished. But something about the monk's presence, so steady, so sure, compelled him to obey. The minutes dragged like hours. His mind screamed louder than any battlefield. Thoughts raced, of meetings missed, of unfinished plans, of imagined threats. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was deafening. But the monk did not intervene. He only watched, patiently, as the king squirmed and battled himself. By the second day, something began to shift. The king, weary of his own mind's noise, finally stopped fighting. He surrendered, not to the monk, not to defeat, but to stillness. And in that surrender, a crack opened, a breeze brushed past him, not from the forest, but from within. For the first time in his life, he wasn't chasing anything. Not power, not praise, not even answers. He was simply there, breathing, alive, awake. I remember hearing this story years ago and dismissing it. I thought peace was for the retired, the monks, the mystics. I thought success came from hustle, not silence. But life has a way of humbling you. Eventually, your achievements start to feel hollow if they're not grounded in something real. Something still, like the king. I've tasted the bitterness of getting everything and still feeling nothing. And I've learned, the hard way, that silence isn't an escape. It's a return to yourself. The monk never gave the king a map, because there is no map, no step-by-step formula to peace. There is only presence. There is only the courage to sit with yourself long enough to hear the voice beneath the noise. That voice isn't loud. It won't beg for your attention. but it's always there, waiting, whispering, watching, and when you finally hear it, when the restlessness dissolves into awareness, you'll understand what the monk meant. The answer was never out there. It was never in a title or a treasure. It was always inside, hidden, silent, sacred. By the third day, the silence no longer felt like an enemy. It became a mirror. Every thought, every memory, every buried fear surfaced. He saw his ambition stripped bare. How much of it was rooted not in purpose, but in proving something. To whom? He wasn't sure. The voices of old advisors, rivals, even ghosts of childhood insecurities came knocking, louder than court debates. And yet, he said nothing. He sat, he breathed, he listened. It was terrifying, that stillness. Because in silence, nothing hides. Not your greed, not your pride, not your pain, but it was also liberating. There was no audience to perform for, no army to lead, no illusion to maintain, just him, and the raw truth of who he had become, and who he could still be. By day 7, he noticed how loud the world had always been, not just outside, but inside him. It was the noise of needing to be right, needing to win, needing to matter, and in that desperate noise, he had missed the simple music of life, the rustling of leaves, the rhythm of breath, the quiet laughter of monks during morning chores. He once ruled over a kingdom, but he had never ruled over his own attention. That realization shook him. I've lived that kind of noise, always chasing, always reaching, trying to make the silence go away. I thought being busy made me important, but truthfully, it only made me tired. I never knew how loud my mind was until I finally sat with it. No phone, no task, no distraction, just stillness, and it nearly broke me. But it also began to heal me. By the 10th day, the king began to smile without reason. His eyes softened, his steps slowed. He no longer felt he had to grasp life so tightly. He saw that control was an illusion, and peace, true peace, only came when you stopped clenching your fists around every outcome. He didn't speak it, but he understood. He had been rich in gold, but bankrupt in presence. On the 15th day, the monk sat beside him. No ceremony, no speech, just a gentle question. What have you learned? The king took a breath and finally broke his silence. I learned that I was never silent, even when I wasn't speaking. But now, I hear silence, I feel it, and I think, maybe, I finally understand it. And though I am not a king, I too seek that understanding, not in retreating from the world, but in learning how to carry silence within it, to be still even as life rushes on, to speak, yes, but only from a place of truth. On the 13th day, the king no longer counted the days. Time itself had softened, the boundaries between past and future dissolved into a single, glowing now. He no longer sat in meditation because he was told to. He sat because his soul yearned for it. There was no effort, no discipline, only a quiet desire to return inward, like a river naturally finding its way back to the ocean. In that stillness, memories floated to the surface like drifting leaves. Some were painful, yes, regrets, harsh words spoken, loved ones ignored in the pursuit of status. But instead of drowning in them, he watched them, like clouds across the sky. And that, perhaps, was the most powerful shift of all. He was no longer reacting. He was witnessing. By the 14th day, even his body responded to this inner shift. His shoulders, once clenched with unseen tension, now hung loosely. His face, so accustomed to the tight mask of authority, softened into a childlike calm. The other monks noticed it too. He didn't speak, but his silence spoke volumes. It wasn't the silence of repression, it was the silence of realization. The kind that humbles you, the kind that tells you the universe never needed your control in the first place. I've come to believe that deep meditation is not about escaping life. It's about entering it more fully. It's about stripping away the noise that clouds our judgment, the roles we play, the scripts we repeat without question. In silence, The king didn't become less of himself, he became more aware, more human, more free. And that realization struck me the first time I truly sat still. I had been living outside of myself for years, looking outward for answers that had always been within. We are taught to seek, to do, to fix, but nobody tells us the power of simply being. On the 15th day, the king no longer asked for teachings. He had become the lesson. When he finally opened his eyes from a long, still meditation, the forest around him shimmered with the same peace he felt within. The birds weren't just birds, they were invitations to remain light. The wind wasn't just wind, it was breath shared between all things. And he, a man once tormented by endless desires, now desired nothing, except to remain in this state of presence. What strikes me most is that the transformation didn't happen because he tried harder. It happened because he let go. And maybe that's the hidden key. We don't find peace by forcing it. We find it when we stop running. When we dare to be still long enough to hear what's always been whispering, beneath the fear, beneath the ambition, beneath the noise. Silence doesn't take anything from us. It gives everything back. He told the monk, with a calm he had never known before, that in all his years of ruling, commanding, and conquering, he had never truly listened, not to others, and certainly not to himself. His palace had been filled with voices, advisors offering flattery, generals barking strategy, servants answering every need, but none of them brought him closer to peace. He was drowning in sound. Every word spoken had felt like control, like power, and yet, what he'd actually built was a cage, one made of opinions, noise, and constant performance. In silence, that illusion shattered. The monk said nothing, only nodded, eyes steady, patient, kind. The king admitted something he had never said aloud, that deep down, he had feared silence. He feared what he might hear in it, or worse, what he wouldn't. He was afraid of discovering that all his achievements had been noise masking emptiness. But instead, what he found was something else entirely, a wellspring of clarity. In those 15 days, he uncovered a mind not lacking, but overflowing with awareness, with simplicity, with peace, and for the first time, he didn't need to speak it aloud to prove it. I understand this. I filled countless moments with words, as if talking louder or longer could silence the discomfort inside. We live in a world that rewards noise. Speak fast, speak often, dominate the room. But what if that very noise is the reason we're exhausted, the reason we can't think clearly or rest deeply? I've learned, like the cane, that words should be tools, not weapons, and like any tool, their power comes from precision, not volume. The king's confession was not one of guilt, but of awakening. He saw how easily we use words to deflect, to defend, to disguise. He saw how the mind becomes fogged by endless chatter, internal and external. He realized that even thoughts, if left unchecked, can become a prison. But through silence, he unlocked the door. Restraint, he learned, is not suppression. It is wisdom. It is strength. The ability to hold a thought without needing to say it. The courage to pause, to reflect, and to choose silence when silence is the wiser path. And in that revelation, he found not just peace, but freedom. Freedom from the compulsion to always respond. Freedom from the pressure to be understood. Freedom from the lie that noise equals importance. He saw clearly now that a single word spoken from inner stillness was more powerful than 1,000 shouted in chaos. And he vowed, from that day forward, to speak less, but mean more, to listen more deeply, to lie from a quieter place, not out of fear, but from the knowing that true peace had always been waiting behind the silence. The monk's voice was steady, like the flow of a river that had seen many storms. He told the king, silence is not emptiness, it is space, and within that space, the truth arises. The king listened intently, no longer with the ears of a ruler but with the heart of a seeker. The story of the Buddha's response echoed within him. I stay silent to dive deep within myself. He realized then that the great masters never sought to impress with words. They sought to understand, and understanding cannot exist where noise rules. The monk continued, most of what we say is either a reaction, a mask, or a repetition. Rarely do we speak from depth. We speak from habit, from fear, from ego. The king knew this all too well. How many times had he spoken just to assert control, just to appear wise, or to silence others? How many times had he filled the air with speeches while his own heart remained unheard? That's when the monk said something that pierced through like a lightning bolt. Excess talking is a form of escape. A way to avoid meeting yourself. That struck me too, deeply. I've used words to avoid silence because silence demanded honesty. And honesty, it's raw, it's uncomfortable, it doesn't flatter or bend. But it's the only path to real peace. The king looked back on his own court, on the endless hours spent debating, judging, commanding, and yet, none of it had brought him closer to who he truly was. Silence had done more in 15 days than words had done in a lifetime. He saw now that clarity doesn't shout, it whispers, and we can only hear it when we are quiet enough, brave enough, still enough. The monk leaned in and said, when people become quiet, many of life's problems simply vanish. Why? Because silence ends the need to always be right. It softens anger. It dissolves the ego's thirst for dominance. The king nodded, feeling those words not as theory, but as lived truth. In his silence, anger had faded like mist, pride had melted into humility, and confusion had cleared into focus. And here's what I've come to understand from this. Silence is not passive. It is active listening, not just to others, but to the deepest parts of ourselves. It's in silence that we hear our real questions. It's in silence that the soul speaks. And that voice, though quiet, is the one that saves us. The king, transformed, understood this now. He had searched for wisdom in books, in power, in legacy, but all along, it had been waiting behind the curtain of his own noise. The Buddha was right. Without silence, self-discovery is impossible, because in silence, we do not lose ourselves. We finally meet ourselves. In a world that screams for attention, silence becomes an act of rebellion, not the kind born from anger, but from wisdom, from a quiet knowing that not every thought needs to be spoken. Not every emotion needs an audience. When I began to understand this, it changed the way I moved through the world. I stopped reacting to every provocation. I stopped trying to win arguments no one would remember. And I started listening, not just with my ears, but with my soul, because being silent is not hiding. It's healing. It's claiming your space without demanding that others shrink. The power of silence is not in shutting down, but in tuning in. It's the moment when you say, I choose not to feed the chaos. That doesn't mean you're passive, far from it. It means you've become selective, intentional, aware. You learn to pause before speaking, to feel before responding, and in that pause, something miraculous happens. You begin to see. You see the games people play with their words. You see your own triggers with clarity. You see how much energy is wasted in noise, digital, verbal, emotional. Silence reveals the cost of constant reaction, and it hands you back your power. There's a sacredness in being still when the world wants you to be frantic. It's where patience is born, not the kind of patience that grits its teeth and waits, but the kind that watches with grace, knowing everything comes in its time. When your mind settles, like dust in a sunbeam, the truth becomes visible, and once you taste that clarity, it's addictive, not in the shallow way dopamine pulls us, but in a deep, soul-thirsting way, because peace, real peace, is not the absence of noise. It's the presence of awareness. Some mornings, I wake up overwhelmed, deadlines, doubts, distractions, but I've learned to close my eyes and retreat into the silence inside me. And every time, without fail, I find something sacred waiting. Breath, rhythm, space. It's not always comfortable, but it's always honest. It reminds me that I am not the noise. I am not the panic. I am the stillness beneath it. And so are you. You are not here to be controlled by the external. You are not here to chase every sound, every voice, every expectation. You are here to master your inner kingdom. That's where joy begins. That's where strength is born. It doesn't matter how loud the world gets, if you know how to return to yourself. You'll never be lost. You'll stand quietly, unshaken, in the storm. And that is the true power of silence. Not an escape from life, but the doorway to finally living it. There is a moment, quiet and unannounced, when you sit in stillness long enough that the noise of life fades into the background. And suddenly, you begin to see your life not from the middle of the storm, but from above it. The rush of accomplishments, the sting of disappointments, the laughter, the grief. It all rises and falls like waves. And you are the ocean beneath it. That's the beauty of silence. It doesn't erase the cycle of life, but it reveals your place in it. You begin to witness, rather than be swallowed. And in that shift, you begin to breathe differently. I've felt this. On the surface, everything appeared normal. Jobs, conversations, to-do lists. But beneath it, a deep ache, a sense that something vital was being missed. Not because I lacked anything externally, but because I hadn't made space to hear my own truth. And when I finally did, when I sat in that terrifying, beautiful quiet, I saw myself clearly. Not as a role, not as a title, but as a human being caught in the dance of life, aching to return to rhythm. Silence didn't give me answers. It gave me presence, and that was enough. Each time we look inward, it's like returning to sacred ground. At first, you may only find dust, distractions, regrets, random thoughts, but keep digging, and you'll find water, cool, ancient, healing water. That's what silence offers when you stay long enough. Renewal. And not the kind that depends on vacations or escapes. I'm talking about the kind that happens while you're right where you are. In the mess, in the ordinary, in the raw now. There's something almost magical that happens when you reflect deeply. Patterns emerge, repeated mistakes begin to make sense. Unexplained sadness softens its grip. You realize your pain is not punishment. Your joy is not random. Everything, every high and low, was shaping you, teaching you, and the more you return to this quiet place, the more you see that nothing was ever wasted. But here's the twist. Silence doesn't take the chaos away. It teaches you to stand in it without losing yourself. It strengthens your roots so the wind doesn't tear you down. It sharpens your vision so you don't mistake noise for truth. That's why inner reflection is not a luxury, it's a lifeline. Especially in a world addicted to speed and distraction. And the more you cultivate this space, the more resilient you become. Not because life gets easier, but because you stop expecting it to. You begin to carry peace with you. Not as an escape, but as armor. You stop reacting to every wave, because you felt the ocean beneath it. And in that knowing, you find calm, you find clarity, you find yourself. When you've tasted the richness of silence, your relationship with words changes forever. They're no longer tools for control or defense, no longer weapons you hurl out of insecurity or pride. They become sacred instruments. And like any master musician, you no longer rush to play, you listen first. You feel the energy of the moment, the emotional undercurrent, the needs hidden behind someone's eyes. Only then do you speak, not because silence is empty, but because words, now, must be full of presence, full of meaning, full of care. And when they are, they land differently, softer, deeper, like a melody that lingers in the air long after the note fades. There's a difference between speaking to be heard and speaking to be understood. Between filling space and creating connection. When your heart is still and your mind is clear, your speech reflects that clarity. You don't need to dominate a room. You don't need to outshine anyone. Your voice becomes calm and deliberate, not dull, but precise. You begin to notice the weight of every word. And you stop throwing them around like confetti. Instead, you shape them like sculpture, slow, intentional, powerful. I felt the shift myself. I used to speak quickly, trying to prove my worth with knowledge, with opinions, with noise, but in truth, I was afraid of silence, afraid it would expose me. Now I see that silence reveals truth, not weakness, and when I embraced it, I started to speak differently. Softer, yes, but stronger too, because real strength doesn't need to shout. It doesn't seek applause, it just speaks from truth, and that's enough. When you speak with grace, your words don't just pass through people, they stay with them. You might not even know the impact you've had, but someone, somewhere, will walk away lighter because of something you said in stillness. This is the quiet power of aligned speech, the kind that uplifts without boasting, that teaches without preaching, that soothes without effort. But this power isn't about performance. It comes from alignment. When your heart, your mind, and your voice are in harmony, people feel it, they trust it, and more importantly, you trust yourself. You stop second-guessing, over-explaining, trying to be everything to everyone. You say only what matters, and in that restraint, in that simplicity, you gain authority, not over others, but over yourself. This, to me, is the highest form of communication, when speaking becomes an extension of your peace, not a disruption of it. When your words become music, not because they're poetic, but because they're real, grounded, honest, and spoken not to fill space, but to awaken something true in those who hear them. Excessive talking is like leaving the tap running, your energy, your focus, your intention, all quietly draining away. You may not notice it at first. The words seem harmless, casual, even necessary, but over time, that endless stream becomes noise, and the more you speak without purpose, the further you drift from your center. Your thoughts become scattered, your mind jumps from one thing to another, unable to land, unable to listen, and without focus, even the best intentions crumble. I've seen it, in others, and in myself, the days when I filled every silence, gave every opinion, chased every conversation. It felt productive, even powerful, but in truth, I was pouring myself out with nothing left to build with. There's something exhausting about constant speech, not just for the listener, but for the speaker. It's as if the more you talk, the more you lose access to what actually matters. Your voice becomes familiar but diluted. People may hear you often, but they stop listening deeply. And worst of all, you stop listening to yourself. That's the real cost. When your mouth moves faster than your mind, your inner compass fades. You begin to mistake sound for progress, attention for meaning, and reaction for connection. But then there are those rare people who speak less, and somehow command more, not through volume, but through presence. When they speak, people lean in, not because their voice is louder, but because their words are earned. They've taken the time to observe, to think, to feel. Their speech is precise, intentional, laced with depth. It doesn't drain them, it reveals them. And in revealing themselves carefully, they invite trust. I've always admired that, the friend who sits silently through chaos and then says one thing that cuts through everything. The mentor who doesn't give you 5 solutions, but one truth that stays with you for years. That's not luck, that's discipline, that's restraint shaped into wisdom. And it's not easy, in a world that rewards performance and fast replies. Being slow to speak can feel risky, but in reality, it's the boldest move, to resist the urge to fill space and instead, fill meaning. What I've learned is this: silence fuels clarity, and clarity fuels power. The less you speak, the more weight your words carry, not because you're withholding, but because you're rooted. When you speak from that place, you don't chase influence, it arrives. You don't demand attention, you earn it. And in a world oversaturated with noise, that kind of presence isn't just refreshing, it's unforgettable. So the question isn't just how often we speak, it's whether our speech is empty, or whether it matters. Throughout history, the ones who moved nations, who led revolutions, who inspired generations, they weren't the loudest in the room. They were the most intentional. Their words were like arrows, rare, sharp, and direct. They didn't speak to impress. They spoke to impact, and that's what made people listen. Think of figures like Nelson Mandela, Abraham Lincoln, or the Buddha himself. Their silence wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. They knew that restraint reveals strength. That presence speaks louder than volume. And when they finally did speak, the world didn't just hear them, it felt them. Now compare that to the ones who never stop talking. The ones who fill every moment with commentary, complaints, self-praise. At first, they draw attention, but over time, their words lose weight. People begin to tune out. Trust erodes. Relationships weaken. Why? Because constant talking often slips into carelessness, exaggeration, gossip, even manipulation, and no matter how charming the delivery, eventually the truth reveals itself. And when that happens, people don't confront, they simply withdraw. You won't even know it at first. The invitations stop, the messages slow, the energy shifts, because no one wants to be near noise that never pauses, near a presence that always needs to be heard but never listens. I've learned this the hard way. There were times I thought talking more would make me look smarter, more confident, but what it really did was expose my need for validation. The more I talked, the more I was unknowingly distancing myself from others. People need space, to speak, to think, to feel safe, and silence, when practiced with awareness, gives that space. It says, I'm here, not to dominate, but to understand. When you look at the greats, those who truly shaped history, you see that their silence was never passive. It was strategic. They listened before they led. They observed before they acted. And their power didn't come from their voice, but from their alignment, their clarity, their groundedness. That's why their words stuck, because they weren't just thrown into the wind. They were spoken from the soul. I believe we each have that capacity, to become someone whose words mean something, to move from reaction to reflection, to speak not out of habit, but out of purpose. It starts with silence, not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of preparation, of listening inward before reaching outward. Because in the end, no one remembers how much you talked. They remember how you made them feel. And often, the most powerful feeling comes not from what you say, but from how wisely, how sparingly, and how authentically you choose to say it. Silence isn't just the absence of words, it's the presence of awareness. A sacred space where reactions pause, and clarity steps forward. In every ancient culture, from the still temples of the East to the desert wisdom of the mystics, silence was never considered emptiness. It was revered as the birthplace of truth. Words, they said, are the children of thought. And when thoughts are wild and noisy, the words that follow become reckless, shallow, and often harmful. But when your inner world is calm, your words emerge as reflections of wisdom. I've seen this truth not just in sacred texts, but in real life. In those rare individuals who speak with the weight of stillness behind them. You can feel it. They don't talk to fill the air. They talk to honor it. Patience, too, is born in silence, not the gritted teeth kind of patience, but the kind that knows everything unfolds in its time. When you commit to even a few moments of quiet each day, no devices, no distractions, just breath and presence, something profound begins to shift. You stop being dragged by every urgency. You stop reacting to every emotion. Instead, you learn to observe, to wait, to choose. This practice doesn't make life easier, but it makes you steadier. And in a world that's always rushing, steadiness is a superpower. Meditation is not a luxury for monks and sages. It's a necessity for anyone who wants to live awake. I used to think meditation was about escaping the world, but it's the opposite. It's about showing up fully, eyes open, heart open, undistracted. When you sit with yourself in silence, uncomfortable truths rise, your fears, your habits, your buried pain, but so does beauty, forgotten dreams, intuition, the quiet whisper of your soul. And once you've heard that whisper, it becomes harder to live out of alignment. Making silence a daily habit is like planting a seed in a noisy field. At first, it seems small, almost foolish, but with time, it takes root, it grows, and then one day, when chaos hits, when someone yells, or disappointment crashes in, you'll notice something. You'll notice that you don't react the way you used to. You pause, you breathe, you respond with grace instead of rage, and you'll know. That's the fruit of your silence. What I've realized is this: the most powerful transformation doesn't come from doing more. It comes from being more present, more centered, more aware, and nothing cultivates that like silence. It's not glamorous, it doesn't give you quick applause, but it gives you something far more valuable. Peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. Clarity that doesn't waver in chaos. And strength that no one can take from you. Set a timer, just 20 minutes, no phone, no background music, no conversation, no scrolling, just you, raw, unfiltered, present. It sounds simple, almost too simple, but in that simplicity lies the doorway to something most people never touch in their entire lives: their true self. When you first sit down, the noise will follow you in. Your to-do list will whisper. Regrets from yesterday and worries about tomorrow will crawl into your lap. That's okay. That's part of the process. You're not here to control the mind. You're here to meet it. And the only way to meet it is in silence. Start by closing your eyes. Feel your breath without changing it. Notice your thoughts, like clouds drifting across a sky. Some dark, some bright, all temporary. You might fidget, you might want to quit. Stay. On the other side of that discomfort is something priceless. A quiet strength, a steady awareness, a calm that doesn't need external validation. In those minutes of solitude, something powerful awakens, not from outside, but from deep within. When I first started this practice, I expected peace to arrive like a soft blanket, but what arrived was agitation. Restlessness, even fear. Sitting alone with my thoughts felt like stepping into a wild forest without a map. But that's when I realized, the forest was me. The parts of myself I avoided in the noise of everyday life were now asking to be heard. And slowly, through silence, I began to listen, not to fix, not to judge, just to understand. That understanding changed everything. There is a reason great thinkers, sages, and creators throughout history sought solitude. Because in solitude, you stop echoing the world's voice and begin hearing your own. In those daily 20 minutes, you begin to untangle the lies you've believed, the patterns you've inherited, the emotions you've suppressed. You begin to witness who you've been, and who you are becoming. And this witnessing is not passive, it is transformative. Do it long enough, and you'll begin to notice changes without even trying. You'll speak less, but with more meaning. You'll react less, but feel more. You'll move through your day not as a victim of noise, but as a carrier of presence. People around you will feel it, not because you've told them, but because you've become it. A quieter, steadier version of you, rooted, awake. And this isn't just a spiritual practice. It's survival, in a world designed to pull you in every direction. Solitude is rebellion. Silence is revolution, and 20 minutes a day might just be the beginning of the most important relationship you'll ever build, the one with yourself. So here we are, standing at the edge of noise, peering into the vast, sacred silence that has always waited beneath the surface. You've felt it, haven't you? That pull toward stillness, that yearning for something deeper than endless chatter, deeper than distractions dressed as purpose. You're not alone. We are a generation buried in noise and starving for meaning. But now, you know, silence is not emptiness. It's not loneliness. It's power. It's presence. It's the ground where true transformation begins. This isn't just a video. This is an invitation, a call to reclaim your own mind, your own breath, your own rhythm, to join a movement that doesn't shout, but resonates. A space where words are spoken with intention and silence is honored as sacred. That's what Zen is about. We're not chasing trends, we're nurturing truth. We're walking this ancient modern path together, breath by breath, moment by moment, And if something inside you stirred during this journey, then you've already begun. You've already said yes to yourself, even if only in a whisper. I believe the world doesn't need more noise. It needs more stillness, more people willing to listen before speaking, to pause before reacting, to reflect before judging. People like you, seekers, builders, healers, warriors of peace. And when we gather, not to overpower but to uplift, something profound happens. We change the tone of the world, one quiet, powerful voice at a time. So if this story spoke to something inside you, if it reminded you of the strength that comes not from shouting, but from showing up in full presence, then take the next step. Like this video not for numbers, but as a signal. Share it not for vanity, but because someone else out there is drowning in noise, waiting for a lifeline. Comment not just for interaction, but to connect, to say, I'm here too, I feel this too. And subscribe, not just to a channel, but to a way of life. One rooted in wisdom, not worry, in peace, not pressure, in being, not just doing. Turn on that little bell. Let each notification be a breath, a reminder to come home to yourself, again and again. Because the journey doesn't end here, it begins here. Every silent step forward is a revolution. Every mindful moment is a victory. Thank you for walking this path with us, not as a follower, but as a fellow traveler. We are all students of silence, and together, we rise, gently, powerfully, unshakably. See you in the next story. Until then, speak less, feel more, and carry your peace like a torch into the world.